The unthinkable has just happened. Keir Starmer, the man who promised Britain a new era of integrity and clean politics, now faces a nightmare he could never have imagined. Live on national television, shocking revelations have surfaced. Documents exposing secret deals, hidden funds, and a web of corruption that could topple his entire leadership. The nation is holding its breath. Westminster is in chaos. And one question dominates every conversation, every headline, every frantic news cycle. Is Keir Starmer about to resign? In an unprecedented and shocking live broadcast, Britain watched as explosive evidence of Keir Starmer's hidden dealings came to light. What began as a whisper in political circles has now become a full-blown national scandal, shaking the foundations of Westminster. The documents revealed that Starmer, under the guise of transparency and public trust, accepted multi-million-pound donations funneled through offshore accounts in tax havens. These funds, traced back to shadowy hedge funds with ties to fossil fuels, private healthcare profiteers, and even arms manufacturing, directly contradict the public image and policies Starmer has tirelessly promoted. The immediacy of the revelations sent the political world into a frenzy. Social media erupted with hashtags like #StarmerMustGo, #ExposedLive, and #Betrayal of Trust. Within minutes, news channels interrupted programming, broadcasting the damning details as journalists pieced together the scope of the scandal. Sources close to Starmer described the moment the revelations aired as apocalyptic, noting how the leader's once steady demeanour faltered in real time. Political allies scrambled, with MPs calling emergency meetings, advisers exchanging frantic messages, and Labour staffers reportedly locked in crisis rooms, trying to manage the fallout. The documents, carefully verified by independent watchdogs, exposed that Starmer's inner circle was aware of the questionable funding, yet chose to proceed, prioritising campaign cash over ethical responsibility. The public reaction was immediate and furious. Protesters gathered outside Labour headquarters, waving signs demanding accountability, while online campaigns spread like wildfire, threatening to engulf the party in a tidal wave of outrage. Polls indicated that a staggering majority of Britons, including former Labour supporters, demanded answers and called for Starmer's resignation. The atmosphere in Westminster shifted overnight. Tory ministers seized the moment, calling the revelations the greatest political scandal in decades, while Reform UK and other opposition parties amplified their attacks, labelling Labour a party now fundamentally compromised. Even within the party, cracks began to appear. Shadow ministers, who had long been loyal to Starmer, were reportedly furious that ethical warnings had been ignored. Angela Rayner's aides confirmed that she was cancelling public appearances, and whispers of an internal coup circulated among MPs. The scandal was not merely financial, it became a question of character, of trust, and of betrayal. Starmer, who once positioned himself as the face of moral leadership in British politics, now faced the stark reality of a nation doubting his every decision. The speed of the revelations left him with no room to manoeuvre. There was no gradual investigation, no measured scrutiny. Everything was exposed live, forcing him into a corner from which escape seemed impossible. The documents revealed a pattern. Offshore accounts linked to a network of influential investors, large sums of undisclosed donations, and strategic investments in sectors the Labour Party had long criticised. Legal experts noted that these revelations could trigger severe consequences, not just for Starmer personally, but for the party as a whole. A public inquiry was already being demanded, with some politicians warning of criminal investigations into potential misconduct and electoral violations. For the first time, the British public was confronted with a question they had never imagined asking. Could the leader who promised honesty, fairness and transparency have been orchestrating a massive, clandestine financial operation all along? The answer seemed to be unfolding in real time, and Britain watched, horrified, as Starmer's carefully curated image of integrity began to crumble before their eyes. The live broadcast was not just a news story, it was a moment of national reckoning. Every citizen felt the weight of the betrayal, the tension of the unknown, and the looming uncertainty of what this would mean for the Labour Party, the political system, and the country itself. As the shockwaves of the revelations swept across the nation, Keir Starmer found himself trapped in a tightening web of crisis, with no escape in sight. Insiders describe him as stunned and isolated, struggling to comprehend the speed and scale of the scandal now dominating every news outlet and social feed in Britain. The documents, aired live, left no room for denial. Undisclosed millions funneled through offshore accounts, investments in industries his party had publicly opposed, and a clear pattern of ignoring warnings from senior advisers. all painted a portrait of a leader whose promises of ethical governance had been betrayed. Within hours, the inner workings of Labour's headquarters descended into chaos. Shadow cabinet members held emergency meetings behind closed doors, debating whether to push Starmer toward an immediate resignation or attempt a controlled public response. Sources report that divisions ran deep. Some advisors urged him to step down quietly, framing it as a chance to preserve dignity, while others pushed for defiance, suggesting a televised address to challenge the narrative and portray the allegations as politically motivated. Every move, however, seemed to backfire. Attempts to craft a statement were met with scrutiny from media outlets and political analysts, dissecting every word, every hesitation, framing it as evidence of guilt or incompetence. Meanwhile, the opposition pounced. Tory ministers, Reform UK leaders, and Liberal Democrats amplified the scandal relentlessly, framing it not just as a party failure, but a national crisis of leadership. Parliament, normally a chamber of measured debate, was awash with outrage. MPs demanded immediate answers, emergency sessions were called, and committees began investigations into the legality and ethics of the undisclosed donations. Starmer's every connection, past decision, and public statement was scrutinised under an unforgiving spotlight. The public's fury grew with each passing hour. Online, petitions circulated, calling for criminal charges. Protests erupted outside Labour offices, with chants of "Resign now" echoing through London streets. Social media campaigns painted a portrait of betrayal and deception, and polling indicated that even staunch Labour voters were losing faith at unprecedented rates. The pressure mounted internally as well. Reports suggest that dozens of Labour MPs signed letters demanding Starmer's immediate resignation, fearful of being associated with a scandal that could permanently damage their own careers. Shadow ministers were caught in an impossible position, balancing loyalty to a leader under fire with the practical need to protect their political futures. Momentum, the influential grassroots faction within the party, mobilised rapidly, calling for nationwide demonstrations and a complete restructuring of party leadership. Starmer's silence was deafening. In a situation that demanded swift action, his hesitation was interpreted as weakness, indecision, and in some quarters, tacit admission of wrongdoing. Legal experts began weighing in publicly, warning that the undisclosed donations, combined with the apparent ignoring of internal warnings, could constitute violations serious enough to warrant criminal investigation, electoral penalties, and even formal impeachment processes within party governance structures. Behind closed doors, advisors reportedly worked frantically to assess the fallout, drafting multiple contingency plans, ranging from an immediate resignation speech to a carefully staged, defiant statement. The stakes were colossal. A misstep could not only end Starmer's career, but irreversibly fracture Labour, handing the opposition unprecedented leverage. Adding to the tension, whistleblowers and former party officials provided new leaks, revealing emails and internal memos that directly contradicted Starmer's public assurances of ethical compliance. Each revelation added fuel to the fire, further inflaming media coverage and public outrage. The national mood was one of disbelief and incredulity. Citizens who had once trusted Starmer to bring integrity and accountability to politics now questioned the very fabric of the promises made to them. Headlines screamed betrayal. Streets echoed with protest. Social media became a relentless tribunal of the storm engulfing Westminster showed no signs of abating. And one thing was clear. The next move Starmer made, or failed to make, would not just define his career, but potentially the future of an entire party and the political trajectory of the nation. The fallout from the shocking live revelations did not stop at Starmer's office. It reverberated across Westminster, plunging the capital into a state of political chaos unlike anything seen in recent memory. As the scandal unfolded, Labour's once cohesive front began to splinter, exposing fractures that had long been hidden beneath the surface. Shadow cabinet members were divided between those calling for immediate action and those still loyal to Starmer, creating an environment rife with suspicion, tension, and fear of being associated with impending collapse. Reports suggest that key MPs, fearing the electoral and legal consequences of remaining in Starmer's camp, began quietly distancing themselves, cancelling scheduled appearances, deleting social media endorsements, and even reaching out to opposition leaders in anticipation of a power shift. The public, already enraged by the leaked documents, amplified the pressure. Polling numbers reflected an unprecedented erosion of trust, with a majority of citizens, including former Labour voters, demanding Starmer's resignation. Social media became a relentless force, with viral hashtags and campaigns calling for accountability, justice, and, in some cases, criminal charges. Crowds outside Labour offices grew exponentially, waving signs, chanting slogans, and demanding immediate answers. The atmosphere in Westminster was described by insiders as apocalyptic, a term previously reserved for moments of national crisis rather than political scandal. Opposition parties seized the moment with ruthless precision. Tory ministers framed the revelations as evidence of Labour's systemic corruption, calling for emergency parliamentary sessions and investigations into both party and personal misconduct. Reform UK amplified the narrative of betrayal, framing Labour as a party beholden to foreign profiteers and secretive financial networks, while the Liberal Democrats demanded immediate action to restore public confidence. The political terrain had transformed overnight. Committees were convened to examine the legality of Starmer's offshore dealings, while police and regulatory agencies initiated preliminary probes into potential violations of electoral law. Legal experts weighed in on the implications, warning that Starmer faced the possibility of criminal charges for misconduct in public office if he failed to act swiftly. Meanwhile, the Labour Party's internal structures began to collapse under the weight of scandal. Momentum, the grassroots faction, organised nationwide protests and mobilised supporters for a campaign explicitly aimed at removing Starmer. Shadow ministers and senior advisers were caught between loyalty to a leader and the pragmatic need to preserve their own careers, creating tension-filled meetings and strategic debates over the party's next moves. Angela Rayner's public absence and reported silence symbolised the broader unease, as senior figures reassessed their positions and contemplated the political fallout. Within hours, whispers of an impending leadership challenge gained traction. Reports emerged of secret letters signed by over 40 Labour MPs calling for Starmer to step down immediately, while discussions of interim leadership plans intensified behind closed doors. The once unified party now resembled a fractured entity, teetering on the brink of collapse. The public's fury was mirrored by fear within political circles. Analysts warned that the scandal could destabilise not just Labour, but the entire parliamentary system, as voters questioned the integrity of leadership and the legitimacy of political processes. The King, it was reported, had been briefed on the situation, with advisers discussing potential constitutional responses to the crisis. Unions, traditionally a stabilising force for Labour, threatened to withdraw funding, further complicating the party's already precarious position. Every angle of the scandal magnified its intensity. The secrecy of offshore donations, the contradiction between public statements and private actions, and the apparent disregard for warnings from trusted advisers, created a narrative of deception that resonated nationwide. Journalists and pundits dissected every document, every email, and every public statement, drawing connections and exposing discrepancies that further eroded confidence in Starmer's leadership. For the first time in modern British politics, the nation witnessed the simultaneous collapse of internal party cohesion, public trust, and media credibility surrounding a single leader. Westminster, normally a place of strategic politicking and careful deliberation, had transformed into a battlefield, with allies turning cautious, opponents growing emboldened, and the public demanding the immediate accountability. The tension was palpable. Every day, every statement, and every silence carried consequences capable of reshaping the political landscape. Starmer's options continued to narrow, with advisers warning that failure to act decisively would not only end his career, but could irreversibly damage Labour, leaving a vacuum in leadership that the opposition would exploit mercilessly. The stakes were now existential. This was no longer a question of personal survival for Starmer, but of the very future of a political party, the stability of parliamentary processes, and the trust of a nation already reeling from betrayal. As Britain watched, Westminster became a pressure cooker of suspicion, strategy, and desperation, and the eyes of the world were fixed on the unfolding drama, waiting to see if Starmer would finally bow to the pressure or plunge the party and the country into deeper chaos. Every decision, every hesitation, and every statement now carried the weight of history, with consequences that would echo far beyond the walls of Parliament, shaping the political narrative of Britain for years to come.